I decided to go live again because I saw um, an interesting call-in show, and since basically um, we didn't get like the full stream tonight, I thought I might just call in to another stream of a guy talking about. Currently, just right now, he's talking about Palestine and Israel, but he says that he's like an PhD and he knows about Ayn Rand. So let's, and he has a link where you can basically just join. And yeah, I thought, why not? Let's just check it out. Okay, I've joined the Zoom link. Let's see what happens. I'll just, now I have basically put you on my screen as well. I had to just adjust you on OBS so that people can see you as well. I don't have many viewers. I just do this as a side project. My channel is the same channel that I wrote in chat with. So you can just click on my name or just look for my name and you'll basically find my channel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if I hit those three dots, it gives me a go to channel link. Okay. Oh, well, this is interesting. I've never had someone come on here and tell me they're simultaneously streaming on their own channel. So
I hope that is okay for you.
I'm okay with it for now. I guess maybe after let me poke around here a little bit and
Sure.
see what's going on here. All right, so I found your channel and
Mm-hmm.
I'm clicking on the more button. You say talking to different people about different things. Join my Discord or comment under my videos if you want to actively shape the content that I am making and thereby actively contribute to my projects. Okay. So there's sounds like maybe it's a pretty broad in terms of the kinds of stuff you talk about. You just say talk to different people about different things.
Yes.
There's
I used
not
to.
like
So I, if you're interested, I can just give you a quick rundown on what I do. Are
yeah,
you? Yeah.
yeah.
So basically, I started this channel a year ago or something like that, and at that time I was traveling still. I was not in my hometown, and basically, I had the idea to do basically stream series on one specific topic, and then basically do a season for one specific topic, and then do like I don't know 10 to 15 to 20 streams in a row to like really go deep into one topic. That was the idea at first, and then to at some point move on to the next topic. I did that for a while. I started with incels and black pill ideology and stuff like that because there was something that caught my interest, and I think it's a socially relevant and interesting topic to talk about. And then after that, I finished that more or less, and it was not as I didn't get as many guests as I wanted to, but I continued to talk about autism, which was something that I came across on my research about incels, which that there was a high correlation there with autism, and it was also a very fascinating topic. So I went into autism, and I made a bunch of streams, but it was even harder to get guests for that, basically. So at some point, I stopped doing content based on like one specific topic, but to extend basically my spectrum of topics that I want to talk about. And now basically I'm talking a lot like I've had talks about Marxism, about anarcho-capitalism. That is also why I joined the channel, because I've had a discussion with an anarcho-capitalist a couple of weeks ago, and there was a mention of Ayn Rand a lot, and I also hear the name Ayn Rand coming up a lot. And since I've seen that you're an expert on it, I would like to, I don't know, have a conversation about it and just find out more. And yeah, I find out about things by having conversations and also by disagreeing with people. So I'll probably give you very naive and spontaneous reactions and criticisms. But if you humor me, I think there can be a fruitful discussion to be had.
Okay, interesting. So you started your channel a while ago, and originally you were doing other topics like incels, involuntary celibate, for anyone who doesn't know that
Yeah,
abbreviation. I guess there's some kind of movement around that issue,
yeah,
and autism, and then eventually you got into more political things like Marxism and anarcho-capitalism, and I guess you heard some
veganism.
conversation. Veganism. Okay.
Yeah,
So Ayn Rand was coming up in one of your conversations
yeah.
with
In preparation for a few of my conversations, the name came up quite a substantial amount of times.
okay, and then somehow you how did you come across my channel in particular? Do you remember?
I just
If it was like some
okay. I just had a debate conversation like an hour ago with another YouTuber who basically saw my conversation that I had with an anarcho-capitalist, and he liked my criticisms of the anarcho-capitalist because he's a mutualist anarchist, um, and he wanted to basically run his system by me and wanted to have my criticism, but somehow the debate got kind of, I don't know, derailed and went into directions that were not so productive, and he basically left the call at some point. And so basically, I just didn't think anything by it. I just went outside to have a walk and to talk to my friend on the phone. And just after I stopped, I got your live stream suggested to me, and I was like, "Man, what a coincidence that I basically lost a conversation." But maybe I can make up for that lost conversation by having another good conversation.
okay. So you were arguing against anarcho-capitalism,
Yes,
not in okay. And I guess somehow that that told the algorithm to suggest one of my videos, and then you found my channel.
probably. I
Okay.
mean, in preparation, I'm watching a lot of content that is probably similar to yours. Uh, Philosophy from an academic standpoint, and so yeah, I think uh, the algorithm starts to get to know me better. So yeah,
Uh-huh. Interesting. Yeah, I always like to know how people came across my channel. So thanks for that story. So you were so you're interested in talking about anarcho-capitalism with me, or
no,
what?
no. I mean, Ayn Rand, as far
Okay,
as I know, is not an anarcho-capitalist, and
correct.
so I would like to just know where the connection comes from and why it is so popular in libertarian circles, and yeah, maybe just I would just like to find out more about the philosophy, I guess. Egoism is something that came up in my last conversation. So basically, my last so the conversation that I've had like an hour ago was talking about was defending basically law and property theory by egoism, by using alluding to egoism, and so yeah, I think I'm mostly interested in egoism.
Okay. Great. There's a lot we could get into. So I'll just say a few things to get it started. So have you ever read Ayn Rand?
No.
Okay. Um, just like to know a little about people's background, their context of knowledge. So Ayn Rand is she was both a fiction writer and a nonfiction writer. So her most famous works are Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. She's best known as a novelist, but she also wrote nonfiction, uh, philosophical books. So she wrote a collection on ethics called The Virtue of Selfishness, and that's the one that goes most deeply into her ideas on egoism. Um, and she also wrote a collection of books, sorry, a collection of essays, which were eventually compiled into a book called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. So those two works in particular might be of interest to you because those are the ones that most directly deal with her ethical views and her political views, at least in a nonfiction format. I mean, these ideas also come up in her fiction. She has very philosophical fiction. Um, but if you just want a nonfiction treatment of her ideas, um, those two works are good ones. There's also a lot you can find online. The Ayn Rand lexicon is a free resource online to learn. You can stick in any word like egoism or capitalism and find some excerpts from Ayn Rand's writings about those subjects or any others like abortion. Um, Sometimes she would comment on current events. But uh, so let, and I'll say, let me say a bit more before I pause and throw it back to you. So she is in favor of egoism. Sometimes she would call it selfishness. But her view of what it means to be selfish or egoistic is different than the way it's commonly understood. Like often, if someone says somebody is selfish, they mean they're acting like a rude jerk. They might lie or cheat or steal to get what they want, violate other people's rights, maybe use force or fraud. Um, but that's actually anti-selfish on Ayn Rand's view. So if we take selfishness to mean simply doing what's best for yourself, she actually would say it's not best for yourself to lie, cheat, steal, engage in force or fraud, this kind of thing. It's better to be honest, for instance. It's better to respect people's rights, to not coerce them. Um, it's like you're not going to be want to be my friend if I'm a rude jerk to you, or if I steal things from you and you find out at least. So that's just, a simple way of showing how it. If you think about the long run consequences of your actions, uh, I think that's necessary to judge whether something actually is in your self-interest, whether something like lying or cheating or stealing is in your self-interest. So Ayn Rand was very much in favor of taking a long-range view of your life, not acting on the whim of the moments, um, considering the consequences of your action. That's part of what it means to be rational, to not just go by whim, by not just be driven by your emotions of the moment, but to think rationally about the consequences for the future on your life. Like, what are going to be the consequences on my life of doing a certain thing, of lying, as opposed to being honest? What's actually going to be best for myself, best for my life and my own happiness? So that's just a little bit about her view of egoism and ethics, and we could talk more about that. But let me just say a bit on the politics. She saw the politics as building on her ethics, so it wasn't just a free floating kind of field, um, which I think actually is where some of the difference between her and libertarians starts to show up. I think many people who would call themselves libertarians, they hold their political ideology separate from a moral or ethical framework. So they might think that their political ideology is compatible with a broad array of ethical viewpoints. Um, it's a kind of big tent approach to politics.
A what approach?
A big tent, like it encompasses many different, an umbrella
Okay,
organization. It
umbrella, yeah.
encompasses many different sorts of groups. Like you could be a Buddhist or a Kantian or a utilitarian or a Christian. It doesn't matter as long as we all agree on this non-aggression principle, as they call it, that this idea that you should not initiate force against other people. We can all work together and collaborate. So I think they tried to have this big tent or big umbrella approach to politics and just take as this their founding principle or axiom, the non-aggression principle, as they call it, or the principle that you should not initiate force, and they're not too concerned about what your deeper views are in ethics
Wait, when you
or
say they,
morality.
who do you mean when you say they?
Libertarians,
Libertarians. Okay, I see.
yeah, right. Whereas for objectivism, which is the name of Ayn Rand's philosophy, she thought you need to have a certain kind of ethics to undergird a certain kind of politics. So ultimately, you need to have an egoistic sort of moral view in order to sustain or to argue rationally for, to argue consistently for a politics of freedom, a politics that actually adheres to this principle of not initiating force against others. And if you don't have this egoistic um, foundation in ethics, then you actually can't consistently argue for egoism. Um, so there's also more fundamental ideas in philosophy, even going deeper than ethics. So there's also the fields of metaphysics and epistemology, which have to do with metaphysics is the basic nature of reality. What kind of world do we live in? Is there a supernatural being that governs it, like God, who can work miracles? Is there a supernatural realm? Um, or is this world, is there just one world? The world that we can see with our, or perceive with our senses and grasp with our minds, our reason. And then in epistemology, which is the study of the nature of knowledge, Ayn Rand is in favor of reason as opposed to faith. So she would oppose religion insofar as religion is a system of ideas that rests on faith, not as opposed to being able to prove it with reason or logic. If you don't have those in place, those epistemological and metaphysical foundations in place, then you also can't have the sort of ethics of egoism and politics of individualism and freedom that she advocates. So, unlike the libertarians, she has a entire philosophical framework underlying her political views. Um, Now, one other thing I'll mention that distinguishes her from the libertarians, in addition to having this whole philosophy under her political philosophy, she also has a different political philosophy itself. If we just look
Well,
at
I
that
was
part
going to
of it,
ask that, like, what is the political philosophy that she's advocating? What is the system that she's advocating for?
yeah, so she calls it capitalism in some places. But exactly what that means needs to be explained because that I think that's a term like selfishness, which can be understood in ways very contrary to what she had in mind. Like a lot of people will say that today the U.S. has a capitalist system, but she would say no, the U.S. today is not a capitalist system. It's actually a mixed economy, meaning it's a mixture of freedom. There are free elements to it, like we have freedom of speech, for instance, but there's also a lot of coercion. So we're coerced to pay taxes by the state. You'll go to jail if you don't pay taxes. There are many regulations, like minimum wage laws that force employers to pay their employees a certain amount and force employees to accept a certain amount rather than being a matter of their voluntary choice as to how much they will work for. So
But
there are lots of regulations today which are anti-freedom on Rand's view, and so it's and on her view to be a truly capitalist society, um, there cannot be initiation of force by the government on the people. So the government cannot force people to pay taxes or force them to adhere to certain regulations like minimum wage laws. Rather, people should be free to do whatever they want as long as they're not using coercion, that is, initiating physical force against other people, like
but,
by robbing them, raping them, murdering them,
but
that sort of thing.
how is that different from anarcho-capitalism then? Like, if she's advocating for capitalism, and if she's saying as long as all of these things exist, there is no capitalism, that sounds like she's anarcho-capitalist to me, from what you're
Well,
saying.
she thinks there should be a government, first of all. So she's not an anarchist.
Okay, but what?
And
Mhm. So, but
so
how
the
is the government?
anarchists are
Yeah.
opposed to there being a government or a state,
Hmm.
or if or they might sometimes talk about competing states, competing governments. But on Ayn Rand's view, there should only be one government which has a monopoly on the use of physical force. There shouldn't be competing governments, which is just like
But
basically tribal warfare.
what is the function then of government?
It's to protect individuals from force. So there are basically three functions of governments, according to Ayn Rand. There's a police force, a military, in a court system. So the
Mm-hmm.
police, they protect you from force of domestic criminals like muggers on the street who might go around and try to, hold people up, stick a gun in their face and say, your money or your life.
Mm-hmm.
Or, robbers who break into people's homes. Police function, their proper function is to round those people up, get them off the streets so that people are no longer subject to force wielders of force, people who go around trying to take other people's property by force or who threaten their persons by force, rapers, for instance. So police deal with domestic users of force, and then the military deals with foreign threats of force.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So people from other countries who would come over and try to enslave our people, conquer them. Um, and then
But
the courts would is another way of dealing with force. It's a instead of having to resort to force, people can settle their disputes peacefully in a court. So the court is another way of extracting force from society to make it a more peaceful place.
but wouldn't
So those are the three functions of government on Ayn Rand's view, and the only
wouldn't
three.
wouldn't they have to impose taxes for that as well? And
No.
no?
So Ayn Rand is in favor of voluntary funding for the government. So, and she wrote an article about this. I think what is it called? Government Financing in a Free Society, which is reprinted in her book, The Virtue of Selfishness. So she talks about various ways you could fund the government without taxes, without coercing people. And I have some videos on my channel about this. One is titled "How to Fund the Government Without Taxes." So, but I can say a little about it right now. For one thing, I think it's important to recognize that the government is going to be much smaller in its function than it is today. So there's not going to be as much need for funding. Like, for instance, we have trillion-dollar programs like Social Security, and we have billion or hundreds of $1 billion programs like Medicare and Medicaid, which right now these are reliant on taxes to support them. There's money taken out of people's paychecks to fund these programs, but these programs would not exist in a capitalist society, which Ayn Rand supports. Retirement is a private issue. You're responsible for funding your own retirement. Maybe set some money aside, maybe invest it in the market if you want, but it's up to you to fund your own retirement. You can't rely on coercing people to fund your retirement. Same with your health care. You might be able to get insurance, but it's going to be private insurance. It's not going to be insurance that you're forced to pay for to the government. So there's not going to be taxes to support that. So there's going to be all kinds of things the government does now. Public education, that's another thing. Tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, which you're not going to have to fund on a capitalist view because education is going to be private. So the government is going to be much, much smaller than it is today. And so you're not going to have to raise the sorts of taxes. You're not going to need to rely on taxes as is done today. Like I don't think you could fund the kind of government we have today on a voluntary system. But if you decrease the size of the government radically, then I think it is more realistic to think that you could fund it without taxes. There could be voluntary funding, donations, for instance, but there are other means. Lotteries is one way that governments could raise money, and actually they do raise money. I think some states run lotteries
Yeah,
still,
in
even
Turkey
today.
they do that.
They
They
do?
did
Okay, in
that. I
Turkey.
think
Is
they
that where
did
you're
that.
from? Turkey?
Or like my roots are Turkish, but
Okay.
like not even Turkish, like half Turkish, half Kurdish.
Okay.
So, but I live in Germany. I was born and
Okay.
raised in Germany.
Okay.
Uh,
So, yeah,
yeah,
so I was
but
just going to mention lottery is one other way you can raise funds without taxes. And then Ayn Rand has a proposal in that article I mentioned having to do with paying the government to enforce contracts. That would be another way the government can raise money. And I've heard other suggestions. But anyways, yeah, I'll stop there and let me see what you want to say now.
mhm. So I guess like the I'm having, obviously I'm having difficulties believing in, like, the problem that I have, like, even if I would believe that but first, wait, before I go in there, I have a question. Is this your position, or is this
Yeah.
are you just educating on Ayn Rand?
No, I agree with Ayn Rand.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So basically, I have two major issues with the way you described it. So I think that the fact that, so first of all, I'm having difficulties believing that we will get the amount of money that is necessary in this type of system. But I think that's really besides the point. The actual problem that I have with it is that I think that how can basically these institutions be fair and sure to be fair if their paychecks depend on basically people donating. So Bill Gates could easily fund, like, probably the police force of a couple of countries, but I don't think they're going to be pretty good at enforcing the law for Bill Gates. So that will be, I think, my biggest contention.
Okay, so
And
how
sorry,
is it going to be? Yeah.
one more thing. Like, the reason why I'm saying I'm having difficulties believing that we will be able to raise enough money for it is basically tied to that second point, where I think that today, like, most of the philanthropy that we see today, like most of the donations that we see today, is actually not philanthropic at all, but is actually buying things. Like, you when you're giving millions of dollars to the US government, then you're basically buying influence to politics. And I don't really believe, like, I believe in some forms of charity that they're actually they're genuinely philanthropic, but I think most of the things that we see, like, for example, the cuts in US aid that have been done, I think most of these things are coercive instruments to control other countries. Yeah. So basically, these are tied to each other. So uh, actual real philanthropic money, I think, is not enough. And since it will not be enough, it will be like donations that will always want something from that donation. So it will not be a fair court if it's dependent on Bill Gates's money. That would be my contention. And or I guess, how would you make sure that this doesn't happen if the whole all control mechanisms are bound to that type of financing? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. I've heard this point raised a number of times, and I've said some things in response to it, but I don't know that I have a well worked out response. It's actually something I would like to think more about, and I guess this is a good opportunity to think through it some more. But I guess I don't have what I would call a polished answer to this sort of issue, but maybe I can just give a kind of rough answer and see where it takes us. Um, so there's this worry that if you have uh, voluntary funding, then the system is going to unfairly uh, favor whoever is doing the voluntary giving. So if Bill Gates is giving a lot of money to fund this system, then there's a worry that maybe he's gonna get preferential treatment in a court of law. Like if he gets sued or something, you might think he can basically buy off the judge, or maybe he's already bought off the judge in advance because he's donated so much money
I mean, he owns.
to.
He's the judge is basically an employee of his, right? At this point.
Well, I wouldn't say he is, but I see that that's the sort of direction someone might try to argue. Um, but I guess like so here's one thought I've had on this. I get maybe this is a way to prove to you that just giving money to someone doesn't necessarily buy you influence over them. So I am someone who's trying to make a living by promoting my ideas, Ayn Rand's ideas. Um, and I've got a Patreon account. I've got a PayPal account. Now you could give me money and say, "Hey, Dan, if I give you, a billion dollars or a million, whatever, will you start promoting socialism or Nazism or, something very contrary to the ideals of objectivism? Yeah. So go ahead and try it. I invite anyone out there who thinks you can buy people off with money. um, you know, Give me as much money as you want, and we'll see if I start promoting socialism or communism or Nazism or altruism or something on my channel. I'm going to tell you, you can't do it. If you want to prove me wrong, try. Give me your money. See what happens. And I guess you you could risk losing your money if I don't start promoting those ideologies. Um, but you could get the money back if I do at some point. I guess we could, it depends on exactly what the terms of the bargain or the deal are. But anyways, if you really think you can buy someone off, I am proof that you can't. And if you think I'm wrong, if you want to prove me wrong, all right, well, give me however much money you want and see if I start promoting some ideas radically different than my own. So, um, like communism. So I don't think you can buy people off uh, y- by just throwing money at them. It takes an act of free will on the part of the person you're offering money to. So some people are open to bribery, other people are not open to bribery. But there's no guarantee that just because you have a system of voluntary contributions that you have sway over somebody else. So maybe I'll just pause there. That's just one line of response that I have. And maybe there are other things that I could say. Maybe there are more relevant things to say. I'm not sure. But as I mentioned, this is just kind of a rough response to this kind of issue. So let me just pause it at this point and see if you want to say anything right now.
Yeah, so I have like a couple of problems with that. So the first problem I guess I have with that is that I feel like we both agree, and that's probably where we are more in agreement, way more in agreement than I would be with an anarcho-capitalist. We kind of agree that the state having the violence monopoly is extremely important. Is like that is like extremely important to not have, to basically have conflict resolution, and to also not have a might makes right situation. And with monopoly of violence, not only that, but also like have a judicial system that actually is not just corrupt, right? So we agree that that's really important, and we don't support something like private security agencies and stuff like that, like fighting with each other, and bounty hunters and stuff like that. And I feel like that must mean that you already know that how important this integrity of the state basically is, to have like a fair and just society. And I'm like a little bit surprised that you yourself would consider your response to to that problem that I've just named, that you yourself would basically say that it's not really a polished answer, and it's not really you're basically yourself not really satisfied with the answer, and you would love to have a better answer for it, right? But I'm like, shouldn't that be something that you already have if you are a proponent of that system? Like, how can you, like, basically without the safety net, if there is a huge danger there of something horrible basically happening, uh why would you recommend us to go this way? Like, that's the one thing that I'm a little bit worried about. And then the other thing, and there, once I had that thought, I basically got reminded of a conversation I've had with I've had two conversations with Marxists and communists on my channel, and I've had like similar issues there, where at some point we got to the point where I asked a question, and I pointed to big dangers that could happen, as I'm sure you're very aware of in communism and in Marxism, that there's big dangers with implementing these systems. Similarly with socialism as well. Socialism as in market cooperatives, not as in social democracies. But then not having an answer to that feels like, well, how can you then promote the system and how can you push us to go there? Do you see what I mean? And sorry, one more thing. And the reply itself also reminded me of Marxists and communists, where we always end up at a place where it's a question of character that determines whether this horrible outcome will happen or not. So basically, you did something really similar, and Marxists and communists also do something in a very similar thing, where they say, well, people should not behave that way, and people are actually good, so they won't exploit the system and they won't basically screw up. But I think history and also current society is not good enough at this point to warrant us having so much trust and just to hope that they're gonna act morally. And similarly, even if we say that it's possible to educate people to become more more better, like you just said, you are not corrupt, right? So even if I grant you, like I believe you, but shouldn't then be our primary goal be to make people more like you, and to, before we even think about promoting a system that you are in favor of? Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's all right. I think you're raising good points. Really good points. So yeah, I made some notes here, and
Cool.
um, let me think about what to say first. I guess just on that last point, I do think politics is downstream of ethics. Like depending on the sort of ethics an individual has and a culture in general has, that's going to shape the politics. So I do think there's a kind of alignment that you need. But I also think there's maybe a kind of reciprocal causation there, like having a certain kind of political system in place incentivizes a certain kind of character. Like I think capitalism rewards rationality and penalizes irrationality. Like if you're a racist, for instance, and you run a restaurant and you say, I'm not going to serve black people, well, you're going to lose business, not just from the black people, but for any non-black people who don't want to patronize a racist. Like, I'm not going to want to go to your restaurant if you're a racist. So, on a free market, I'm free to go somewhere else. And I think over time, if you do act irrationally, and I take racism to be a form of irrationality, there's no justification for um, evaluating someone's core character on the basis of their skin color. I think that's irrational. And I think if you act irrationally, you will be outcompeted on the free market by people who are more rational and don't judge people on the basis of superficial characteristics like their skin color. Um, so I do think that in rationality is a virtue. It's the primary virtue, actually, in Ayn Rand's system of ethics. Like I was saying before, how she's an egoist and she's in favor of pursuing your self-interest. Well, the primary way in which you achieve your self-interest is by using your mind, by using your rational mind and thinking and being logical about things. So having a certain political system in place, I think, encourages a certain ethical character. Um, and maybe there's also a causation going in the other way. Um, like if you are the sort of person who is rational, then you are more likely to want a system that allows you to act on your reason, um, and reap the rewards of being rational. Whereas if you're an unthinking person, if you just drift through life like a couch potato and watching mindless shows on TV, then you might feel like, oh, I want somebody to take care of me. I'm not fit to take care of myself. I haven't created the kind of character that is capable of supporting myself. I need a government to step in and be my caretaker because I'm not able to do it myself. So if you have a certain character, that's also going to influence the type of government that you want. Um, so I think the causation goes both ways, and there's kind of a reinforcement going on between ethics and politics. Um, so, but let me go on to some of the other points you were making. You were saying, why advocate this system if you only have a rough answer to this issue of how would you deal with this worry, this problem or alleged problem that a voluntary system would allow for bribery. Um, so one thought on that is there are degrees here of being able to support a system, and I don't think I wouldn't say like I'm the world champion of defending capitalism and I could do it as well as Ayn Rand could do it. Um, but I also wouldn't say I'm the world's worst defender of capitalism, and there's nothing at all I could say about it. I'm somewhere in between those two extremes. And I think there's a lot I've learned about capitalism that enables me to defend it to a certain extent. But maybe there are some holes in my understanding or some weak points which you could probe, and maybe this is one of them. But I think I've learned enough about capitalism to promote it, but I guess I should still acknowledge that there are certain areas, certain aspects, um, which I could use strengthening on. Um, and I think this is one of them. But on this issue that I feel relatively weak on, I did have some more thoughts, which maybe let me just put them out there, and this could be maybe part of my journey of strengthening this or overturning it. I mean, I should be open to the truth wherever it leads. I shouldn't be dogmatically aligned with some viewpoint. I should be open to the possibility that something overturns my support of capitalism. But so far, I'm not aware of anything. Like you can raise questions, like as you have, you can raise objections, and I think I have at least partial answers to them. But I'm not going to overturn my entire philosophy of government because of one little issue that sometimes comes up, and I feel I have a partial answer to. I think I would want to encounter a more devastating sort of objection to give up my belief in capitalism or my support of capitalism than I think this warrants. But hey, I'm open to being convinced that this is a more serious thing than I take it to be right now. Um, but let me say some other things on it. So I think there's going to be right now there's lobbying of the government. So you have people who try to influence government officials. But I think that is a lot of the lobbying that happens because we allow for regulations in our system. Like I mentioned, the minimum wage law as a type of regulation. I guess that would be a labor regulation. Um, but you have there's many regulatory agencies, the FDA, the SEC, FCC, FAA, all these alphabet agencies, they're sometimes called. Um, so in all these people, I think potentially could be bribed. But if you had the system set up such that there were no regulators, you didn't have these regulatory agencies, then who would there be to bribe? Now, maybe you could say the court system. You
Obviously,
could
yeah,
bribe
that would be,
judges in a
yeah,
court
yeah.
system because that is one part of the government which I do think should exist. That's one of the three basic functions
And it's like
of government.
hugely important for everything. Like it's the basis of like it's at the core of every conflict that exists in a society, right? And if someone is able to basically decide that, that makes him king, basically. Then you would have a monarchy. I don't know if you are you in favor. Like, would you be okay with having a monarchy?
No. But
Okay. Yeah.
let me just fill up my water here. Give me 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Sure, sure, sure.
Okay.
This is a really, really cool, nice conversation. Uh, I like it so far a lot. Obviously, we disagree on most stuff, but he's basically answering every question, and he's engaging with every objection that I have. That's really cool. Is this your first stream though? No, it's not my first stream. I feel like these are bots. Not sure.
All right. I am back. Heard you were talking to your stream, I guess, when I heard you say a
yes,
few words.
to my 4 viewers.
Oh. Well,
um,
you might have about the, let me check my stream. Yeah, mine said, or right now it says I got 6 viewers.
nice. Let me like your stream so it gets pushed up a little bit, maybe.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, actually, that's a good reminder for me. So if you all want to help this stream get promoted in the algorithm, please give it a like. That would definitely be appreciated. And also any subscriptions would definitely be appreciated. And actually, I can put a link. Let me put a link over to your page. Um, I'm looking for the. Oh, do you have a watch page for this?
Yeah, so on my channel, there is the link to Kick and Twitch. I stopped streaming to YouTube because I got a few videos taken down because they were basically, I don't know, it was some black pill videos where I was talking to black pill adjacent people, and apparently some stuff that they said was against TOS, or I don't know. There is not really transparency there, and that's why I stopped streaming on YouTube. I might start again. I don't know. That's
okay.
I'll see.
All right. So it's not on YouTube, but if anyone wants to see his YouTube channel, I guess they can just go to the 3 dots by his name.
But I upload the highlights on YouTube, so I usually don't really cut anything. I have one more thing that I would like to talk to you about, which I didn't get to talk about with the libertarians that I talked to. So basically, I guess the idea why so the problem that I mentioned would be solved if we would basically force everyone to chip in and to basically publicly finance public jurisdiction and enforcement, right? So, but the reason why you don't want to do that is because you're basically violating people's consent that their money would be taken. So I guess I'm assuming that you would be totally fine with us, me and you, or me, you and the third party, the three of us putting money together and then buying some good, right? You'd be totally fine with that. With us then having like a public, like mutually owned, like where we basically collectively own something, that would be fine for you, right? Because we all agreed basically.
Yeah, as long as it's voluntary.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
have a problem.
Exactly. So the problem is like with the voluntariness, and what I'm like thinking is that I think that you also could imagine stuff that would be really, really good for a society to have, where it would benefit everyone immensely. That like I've read like a couple many years ago, 7 years ago or something like that. I read Adam Smith Wealth of Nations, right? And basically what he's saying is that there is stuff that the market is just not providing, that is still extremely good for all of society, and all of society is profiting from it. And he's saying that school is one of these things, right? So something like giving free education to everyone is beneficial to all of society. Like for every employer, it's really good that the people that he's employing are able to read, right? It's like dropping the cost of having someone that can read immensely. Like, it's just objectively good for everyone, but there's not really an incentive for someone to educate everyone, right? So can you at least imagine scenarios where we would have something like law enforcement that would be extremely beneficial for society, maybe not as important as law enforcement, but maybe something else that we could not be able to fund with donations or any other thing, right? Can you conceive of that, or do you think like that is always possible to fund it with donations?
I think it's always possible to fund it by voluntary means, including donations, but there could also be other voluntary means like lotteries, for instance.
So you don't think that there is any scenario in which we could find something like, for example, education for free for everyone?
So education, I think it's like food. I mean, it's clearly a good thing to have, at least to some level. I don't think there's a reason everyone needs to spend 30 years in school and get 5 PhDs or something, but have a basic
Sure.
level of reading and writing and knowledge of mathematics, how to add and subtract. Sure. I mean, it's so clearly a value to people, just as food is a value to people, but we don't need the government to force people to fund some food program. People will voluntarily have markets for food. They will produce food. They will sell food because they can make a profit on it. And I think the same thing is true of education. There's going to be a market for education. Now, there could be different levels of quality, just like for food. You could go to a 5-star restaurant and eat super expensive, or you could buy, ramen noodles for 20 cents and eat much more cheaply, and then everything in between. But there's going to be some education for everybody. And I mean, lots of education you can even get for free just going on the internet. I mean, right now, I spend a ton of time just reading Wikipedia articles online, which is
But I mean,
entirely free. And
you
I think it
needed
actually
someone
is quite good quality.
to teach you reading, right? I would argue that
You
children
might,
need
yeah,
education.
but I mean, well, there could be, if we're talking about technology in the future, maybe there will be AI, which could help teach kids how to read. Maybe it already is in some ways. I don't know. But even if we set that aside, even if you do need a human teacher, I think there will be plenty of demand for that to create a market at different levels. Again, you might
Yeah,
have super awesome teachers and then, more amateur teachers, but there's going to be teachers
and you
for
don't think
everybody.
that anyone will be left out of that?
No, I don't think so.
So,
Not if you have a free market.
okay, interesting. But that's already happening right now, right? That there
We
is
don't have a free
countries.
market.
I
And
mean,
nowhere has a free market.
that seems like seems like again like an argument that a communist would do, where they say, when we point to like socialist countries and we say, look, these countries are socialist and look how it's going there, look what's happening there, they would always say that's not socialism, that's not communism. And I feel like when we look at countries that have higher, like less state, like smaller state countries, we definitely do have like let me just give you a really easy example. For example, in Turkey, we have way more privatized a way more privatized education system, where basically children go to school in the from 8 till noon, right? And then after school, basically they go to a private school, and just in order to get their basic education, like 95% of people have to go to these private schools to just to be able to finish high school. Basically, they are reliant to going to these expensive private schools. Otherwise, they will probably not make it. It's really very low percentage of people that make it without these private schools, because like the education system has been basically shrunk down so much that in favor of these private schools that basically now everyone has to pay, and not everyone can afford it, right? And you can of course say, yeah, but it's not really completely free market and blah blah. But we see like with smaller state, it seems to be that people are being left out. And you could say, yeah, because it's not completely free. But it seems like right now, as we what we see is that in countries with a bigger state, we see that every child gets the basic education that they need to start life. Um, and same thing with and the opposite in countries where it's really shrunk down. And then there is also like, I think that here actually like this leftist and right wing, right, I don't want to call you right wing, I don't know if you're right wing or not, but basically there is this philosophical difference, I think, that have like this different view of human beings, where my view of human being is that yes, there is genetic components. Yes, there is basically not every child is a blank slate. I don't believe in that. But I think that the social aspect and the things that you put in the child are so much more important and so much more definitive and deterministic of what this child is going to be, and how big of a social impact and how successful this child is going to be. And therefore, to me, the idea that a child's education is dependent on how much money the parents have is something that I believe is very, very detrimental to society. So, and that would be a case where I think that we as a society, once we are in consensus that is the case, since you and me, we both believe in democracy, I think that at some point, me and you as a society, we should be able to come to a consensus. If we all believe that that's the case, we should be able to say, listen, we need to do something that goes for everyone. And in order to do that, we also have to charge everyone. And otherwise, that's not possible to do. And I think that if from your point of view, just one person disagreeing with that would basically fuck it up for everyone. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I think I would be fine with violating that person's consent to a small extent. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a few points you raised there. I guess I'll start with the one about well, it's
Socialism, socialist countries.
no true Scotsman. I think that is
Yeah.
the fallacy that's sometimes used. Like, well, this is not pure capitalism, so it's not really an example of the point you're trying to make. Um, or socialism, on the other hand, this is not true socialism, so you can't really say it's not. This is evidence of socialism not working. What I think we can see is the closer a system is to the sort of system that I advocate, at least the evidence I've seen is that those systems tend to do better. And the further a system gets from that, the worse it does. So even if you don't have a pure example of capitalism, I think it's still important in its relevance that the closer you get to that, the better a system does, or at least it would be relevant if that were true. And based on what I've seen, like if we look at countries that are freer, they tend to do better. Like Hong Kong is one example that just came to mind. Um, I know Euron Brook, he's mentioned this many times. He's another podcaster, objectivist. There's the Euron Brook show, which I listen to a lot. He's probably the most well-known person there, or well-known person today who is promoting Ayn Rand's ideas in the world. So you might be interested in checking his show out. But he's given this example of Hong Kong as what used to be this tiny fishing village, but then they adopted these free market principles, at least a large element of it, maybe not 100%, but a large element. And then it became this flourishing civilization, and you got huge skyscrapers and tons of wealth has been produced. So I think that that shows something about the power of these principles, even if they're not taken to their extreme, like I would have them be taken. There's still many examples like this. And then you have the contrast between places like East Germany and West Germany, or the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. The countries that are much freer um, produce a lot more wealth. They have a much greater standard of living. Um, the United States, which I think was arguably the freest country that ever existed, at least at a certain time in its history, has also become maybe the wealthiest country in history. So if you look at these kinds of correlations, then I think that provides evidence that these principles work, and there's an explanation of them. It's not just a coincidence that the free countries happen to also be the wealthy countries, or the wealthier countries. I say the freer countries happen to be the wealthier countries. Um, but there's a mechanism that explains why that correlation holds, which is that reason, our rational minds, don't function under force. This is a idea that Ayn Rand discusses in her writings a lot. Um, so think of Galileo, actually, I think is maybe a good example of this. So he had this idea of the geocentric, or sorry, the heliocentric view of the solar system. The planets go around the sun, and the Earth goes around the sun instead of the sun going around the Earth and all the other planets going. And I mean, he didn't originate this, but he was one of the main proponents of it. But he was put under house arrest by the Catholic Church, or at least the Catholic Church had a hand in putting him under house arrest. And what does that do to the progress of science, which you need to create the technology, which you need to create the wealth of our civilization? If you have a theocratic religious society which stifles thought, which stifles reasoning, and says we will burn heretics at the stake, and if you don't believe whatever is written in this holy book, even if it says that the sun goes around the earth, then you can be thrown in jail or killed. That's stifling. That's not good for the progress of science. For reason to function and discover all the knowledge that we have, it has to be free from force. I guess you could, or at least for you to, I mean, this ties into the issue of egoism also. Like, um, you might think, well, I'm free to think even if I'm put in a jail cell. Um, I can read books in jail. I can read Galileo's books about the heliocentric view of the universe, and I can study Copernicus and all this other stuff. But you can't act on any of this knowledge if you're under threat of force. Like if you're confined in a jail cell, you can't use this knowledge
No, I
to
absolutely
do
agree.
anything.
I 100%
So,
agree.
in order to benefit from the use of your rational mind, you also need political freedom. You need to be able to act on that. Maybe you write a book and make a bunch of money off it if you publish this theory, this heliocentric theory, or maybe you want to create some invention, the light bulb. Thomas Edison, he can patent some invention he has, and then he can benefit from that. He can make lots of money off of it. Um, but if you don't have any system that respects people's rights, including their rights to things like patents, their intellectual property rights, then there is no incentive, or at least there's less incentive to produce these goods. Um, so if you have a system that protects people's property rights, that is their rights to the property that they have produced, that they've earned, not not property, as opposed to things they've stolen from someone. Like if I'm a farmer and I put in all this effort to planting crops and then harvesting the crops, that takes a lot of work. But then if I can use those crops to make money, if I can sell them at a market and benefit from them, then I have an incentive to do this work. But if someone is just going to steal my crops and then sell them himself, then well, I have no incentive to keep doing work to farm and harvest crops. But if there's a system in place that protects people's rights, that penalizes someone who tries to steal the crops that I put in the work of producing, then there is an incentive. There's a profit motive. So there's this is the reason why when you have countries that respect people's rights, meaning protects them from physical force, which leaves people free to act on their own judgment and reap the benefits of their own efforts, then those societies produce more wealth. That's why there's a reason that explains why the freer countries become wealthier. So I think there is good reason, and we see it borne out historically. It's not just a theory. If we actually look in history at the countries that are freer, they are also more prosperous economically. It's not an accident. So I said a lot there, but and I have some more thoughts that I can make, but let me pause there and see if you want to say anything. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
I think it's good that you stop there because I have direct answers to that specific point. So I think I would like to answer on two levels. So one level, it might have seemed like my argument has been a utilitarian one where I'm trying to maximize like basically the success of a state by giving education to every child. But it's also and I do believe that this very small contribution to give basically free education to all children up to a certain age and up to a certain degree, I think that immensely increases the I think that's just something for talent. I think it's so randomly distributed. The talent is so randomly distributed that a lot of children are not even getting the chance to basically develop to human beings and to participate in a meritocracy. That's the one thing, but actually it's more of an ethical point to a certain extent as well, because I do believe in meritocracy, and I do believe that merit should be rewarded, that good, like that effort and like should be rewarded. And I feel like there is an injustice there where children are basically being left to like, you can't say that someone who's not earning a lot of money is to a certain extent responsible for what they're earning, but always to a certain extent, and the child is definitely not responsible for that. So it's also an ethical point that I'm making there. The second point that I think is important is like, it's also an ethical one. You have this argument of especially of climate change activists and climate change people where I'm basically, for example, someone, they want a certain legislation being passed, some regulation being passed to prevent climate change, right? And you tell them that basically just that legislation would kill a certain amount of people on the world just by raising the costs of certain goods. For example, when you raise oil prices, this will make certain food productions not viable, and this will reduce the amount of food produced. This will increase the price in food, and this will lead to people starving, right? That's a calculation that we can make. And so we can objectively say that a certain type of legislation can cause people to suffer and to die. And the argument is always, yeah, but we if we don't prevent climate change now, basically it will in the future kill way more people, right? And so I feel like this argument of inequality today for wealth in the future is a similar argument, and I think it's dangerous, and I think it's also not ethical. Like, it's this making this calculation of lives today versus lives in the future. But that's basically the calculation that free market economists are basically talking about. So they're basically saying, yeah, but if we allow for more inequality, which not buying children free school is more inequality, leads to less absolute poverty in the future. So more relative poverty now or in the future leads to less absolute poverty, because we're basically increasing our productivity, and the poorest guy today is way more wealthy than the poorest guy 100 years ago. So that's a win, right? But it's the same type of logic of we're basically sacrificing people today for lives in the future. And I don't know. I have an ethical problem with that to certain. I do get where it's coming from, but I think it's dangerous, and it's I'm also not feeling very comfortable with it ethically. In terms of like what free market economies being way more productive and being way more powerful, I agree. I definitely agree. In the same sense that a car that just goes straight is faster than a car that is being steered, right? You always have some loss of you always have some loss of speed there when you're basically steering the vehicle. But I think and I absolutely disagree with like planned economies. With I don't think it's possible or good to do. But I think a certain amount of steering is necessary because this trade-off is, I think, not an ethical one, and also because I think it's. I mean, when we're talking about growth and when we're talking about success, we're mainly talking about like technological success and the increase in power that we have over nature, right? That's basically what we're talking about. And when we look at the amount of destruction we are already able to do, I don't know if just going forward without any steering at all is the best thing to do. I think we're already on the edge of self-destruction. Forget about, we don't have to agree about climate change or anything like that. I think everyone, like no matter of what political color you are, you would agree that we are very much capable of self-destroying. So I don't know if humanity being so powerful right now, just giving them free hand of growing exponentially is a good idea.
Okay. On climate change, so I'm going to give you a reference to someone who specializes in this issue, and his name is Alex Epstein. He's written a couple of books. One is called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. The other is called Fossil Future. And he has a certain perspective on these issues, a pro-human flourishing perspective, uh, as opposed to a anti-impact perspective. So I think a lot of environmentalists, their concern is not with human well-being. It's not how can we make the planet as good as possible for human beings. It's rather how can we eliminate the impact of human beings as an end in itself. And it's not it's it's not the goal for the for at least some environmentalists is not human well-being. It's just to keep it's to make
But that
the
is an
earth as it
argument.
would be if there were no human beings.
Sure.
So it's kind of an anti-development, anti-industrial sort of viewpoint. And
But that
if
is
you're
one
an
of the
egoist,
arguments. But that is still one of the arguments. Yeah, you have heard this argument before, right? That I just mentioned.
I didn't entirely follow the argument.
The argument
Not
is we're saving people today. We basically imply doing legislation to that will increase the oil price, for example, and this will eventually kill people, right? You agree with that? So, for example, now forbidding fracking oil, for example, right? What does that do? Forbidding fracking oil increases oil prices in theory, right? And that could lead to people having to pay more for gas, and that would lead to people paying more for food, and that could lead to people dying from hunger, right? We see this correlation in the markets today. Do you disagree? Do you disagree with with legislation making people die from hunger? That this exists?
I just so I don't know if that's the right way to frame it. Like I don't think of uh, laws as do they promote hunger or alleviate hunger. The way I think of laws fundamentally is, do they protect people's freedom or not? Like you could solve somebody's hunger by stealing from someone else. Like if there's a hungry lazy bum on the street who just he could support himself, but he chooses not to work.
No,
Now
no, I
you
think
could pass a law that forces me to, redistribute some of my income and solve his hunger,
I,
but
I
I
feel
don't
like
think a law should do. Yeah, go
we're
ahead.
misunderstanding each other here. What I'm saying is currently in the US or in Germany, there are green laws being passed, right?
Yeah, I don't follow it too closely, but I know
Okay.
there are some
So there
some
is
laws.
some laws being passed. For example, Biden has banned fracking oil, right?
I don't know.
Okay,
I
okay.
mean, I've
Okay,
heard
but
things like
but
this,
but
but
there is like, okay, I can maybe tell you about it. So there is laws being passed that are being passed to reduce climate change. No matter
yeah, I've
what you
heard
think
that.
about it. So, and these laws are basically reducing production and basically limiting production and making things more expensive than they would be without the regulation. Would you agree that this exists? These types of regulations? I mean, regulations actually
Um,
always do that, right? Like all type
uh,
of regulation makes a product more expensive, correct?
Hold on just a second. I just
Sure.
got a chat come in
No worries.
from Mark. So Mark asks if there's still time to join. I don't think there will be, Mark. Thanks for making an attempt, but yeah, probably not going to be time. I'm not sure how that long this call is going to go, but I don't think I'm going to take another call after this one. So maybe we can chat another day. Um, okay. Sorry, could you
So
say that again?
yeah, so legislation, restrictions on production always make a good more expensive.
Restrictions on production make a good more expensive. Yeah, I mean, at least in a general way, yeah. If you
Yes.
reduce
So
you reduce supply, then the price will go up.
exactly. And if we now look at, for example, green legislation being passed, like in order to prevent climate change, for example, fracking oil being
Yeah,
banned, that leads to the good being more expensive. And it has trickle down effects to, for example, food production. And we always have the effect. You can see that, for example, when at the beginning of the Ukraine war, food got so expensive for a certain amount of time that a lot of people in the world actually died from hunger. Okay, so we don't have to go that far, but there is some suffering on people that are on the extreme lower end of poverty. Some suffering is going to be caused to these people and actually to all of us, all of society. But these legislations are being passed, these green legislations are being passed, and this causes immense amount of suffering for a lot of people today, right? And when I, for example, argue for that, the response that I'm getting from, for example, climate activists is that, yeah, but we're saving lives in the future. People today die
mm,
of hunger because of me banning fracking oil, but I am saving people in the future who
I
would
see.
die from catastrophes, etc. And I think I understand the argument, I understand the point, but I think it's a dangerous point to make, and I think it is ethically problematic to just say, yeah, fuck the people today. I have to save a bunch of people in the future. The first problem is we don't know how good you are in determining what in the future is going to happen, and the second problem is you're basically doing the trolley problem. I don't know how good how good of a calculation that is to just put like the people that are living today, their suffering to and to weigh it against the people in the future. And I feel like with capitalism, it's the same amount, same type of argument where you say, yeah, today people suffer from inequality, but the poorest people today are going to be way more. The poorest person in 100 years is going to be way more wealthy in absolute terms than the poorest person today, and that justifies me treating the poor person basically shit.
Oh, so you think the you're saying that like the justification of capitalism now is that it's going to be better for people in the future.
Yeah, so what you basically said is that the nation becomes better the less free it is, the more inequality is, and it seems to be that way. Like, it's, don't get me wrong, I don't disagree with that. Like when you look at, for example, China makes inequality rise up, like makes the market more free, and inequality rises, but absolute poverty, like hundreds of millions of people are being lifted out of absolute poverty, right? But relative poverty is way higher, because like there is multimillionaires and billionaires popping up out of nowhere in China in the last like 50 to 60 years, right? So absolute poverty goes up, but so relative poverty goes up, but absolute poverty plummets basically in China, right?
Yeah, I don't care about relative inequality. I don't think that is a problem. I guess in a way it can be good in that it could be a sign that people are being rewarded, um, maybe not a perfect correlation, but some kind of correlation. Like if you're Bill Gates, for example, and you are a business genius and you create this amazing product, or you're Steve Jobs with the iPhone, you create this awesome product, well, and you get rewarded awesomely, you become a billionaire. Well, I say, well deserved. Good job. Good on you. I'm happy for you. You made this amazing thing, which billions of people are willing to pay money for. Well, why shouldn't you become a billionaire? You've added so much good to the world. I say good for them. And it's not like they didn't steal that from anyone. They're not robber barons. I think that's a smear, which is often used of uh, business heroes who have done amazing things, great things. Rather, these are relationships of trade. They produce some value, which benefits others,
Sure.
and then others, they voluntarily give their money because their lives are made better by using the product. So it's a win-win kind of transaction. And the inequality that results, I think, it's a healthy thing. It's not a bad thing.
I agree. But what you made two arguments why we should not tax, basically, right? The first argument you made is an ethical one, where you say, okay, it is not ethical to take money, to force people to pay taxes, right? That's the first one. And then the second one is that you think that also the societies that don't tax, and that basically the more libertarian a society becomes, the more successful it is and the better it gets, and the life standard, the standard of living increases, right? That was the second argument that you made. So you basically made the case for libertarian societies on two levels. Am I getting this correct?
Well, just first on the word libertarian, I don't use
Oh,
that
sorry.
word for my view because they're often associated with anarchism, which I
Okay.
reject,
Sure.
or at
Sure. I
least I don't
agree.
support.
Yeah.
But we can use the term capitalism or free market.
Sure.
Like the more capitalists or
Like for me, because for me, like capitalism is also, and social democracy is also capitalist to me. But like, because it has
well,
a free market, but yeah, obviously it's varying degrees, I
if it
guess.
has taxes or regulations, I
Yeah,
would
it
say it's
has.
not a
Yeah.
free market.
Okay.
Yeah. So for that
Okay.
reason, so the way I
Sure.
understand capitalism, there is no initiation of force, which means there's no government that forces people to pay taxes
Yeah.
or forces people by regulations that they have to abide by. So if it has those things, I wouldn't call it capitalist.
Yeah. I have
Um,
I have one more question.
yeah,
Just one quick thing. So you said lotteries, right? So
yeah.
basically what you're saying is that the government should operate a business at the end of the day, right? So you're basically telling the government to operate a business and to make a profit from that business, and to use that profit for the things that it needs. For example, law enforcement, right?
I wouldn't call it a business. I mean, maybe in a loose sense of that word, you could say government is in the business of protecting people from force. But
No, no,
um,
the lottery itself, not the law
oh
enforcement.
yeah,
The
well
lottery.
that would just yeah that would I wouldn't call that. I mean, it's just a means of raising money for the government to carry out its function of protecting people from force
But it's making a
by
profit,
having
right?
a
Like,
I don't
how
know
else
if
would
you
they
would.
finance anything with it if it's not making a profit?
I mean, I guess you could call it a profit in that, but I mean, the point is not to like make money to enrich themselves
But
so
how
that they
would
can do something else beyond those three basic functions. I mean, all the money that the government raises would be for those purposes of police, military, courts.
yeah, but it would have to. So basically, they would have to buy paper that is necessary for the lottery tickets, then imprint them, like spend some money for that, right? And
Okay,
then
sure.
yeah, and then they would have to sell them and make a profit from like the amount that they take in from selling these lottery tickets would have to be higher than the cost to produce these lottery tickets, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
You could
so
call
it
that a
is a,
profit, I guess.
I mean, what else would you call it, right? What then they use
I
this
you
profit
could
for is something else, but they have to create a surplus, right?
uh yeah. So I
Okay.
mean, I there seems something I'm not comfortable with calling it a business because maybe that's because I exclude force from business. Like if you're doing business, it doesn't involve the use of force. It involves trade, voluntary trades. Like if you run McDonald's, you trade hamburgers for cash, but you're not
Mm-hmm.
using force. Whereas the government, essential to what the government does is use force in retaliation. It doesn't initiate force, but it uses retaliatory force.
No, no. I mean, in the
Um,
lottery example, like you suggested that a lottery would be a different way of a different means of financing law enforcement. So
yeah.
in the lottery case, the lottery itself would be a business, right?
I mean, maybe you could
I don't see like
peel
any
off
different.
that
Yeah.
part of it, like separate that aspect of it and say that little aspect of it is a business. I don't know
Which
if I
little
want
aspect?
to the lottery aspect. I mean, the government is the larger
I'm
thing,
not
and then
saying the
within that,
I'm not saying the government
the
is a business. I'm not saying the government is a business. I'm saying you're basically advocating for the government having a business, which is the lottery. Like it has a business, which is a lottery.
uh, maybe you could call it that. Maybe you could
But
call it a business.
why
I
would you
really haven't
not
thought
call it like
much.
why would you not call it that? It's literally just a business that exists in the real world. And the only difference is that the government is operating that. So I don't see any reason why you would not call that the government operating a business.
Maybe that's okay. I'm just not sure. Um, I guess because since it is a means to funding the government, I mean that in itself that that makes me cautious. Now maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe there's
I
no
don't see like
problem.
any like it is just the government. I mean, like you know this from governments do that like on a regular basis. The Turkish government does that, has that done that multiple times,
I mean, I'm
and
happy right now
it
to
is
go along with calling it
so
a business
and it's not
for
really
right now at least.
it's not even
Yeah.
important for the point that I want to make. It's actually not that important, but I'm just
Okay.
wondering why you're so cautious about it. But yeah, okay. Um,
I think
so
it's very important to not mix up like government force with voluntary trade, and I think that's why I'm a little cautious about it.
but it's
But
not. There is no force
I
involved there.
yeah,
There is
yeah.
no
So
force
I
involved
can
there.
throw my
So
caution to
yeah,
the
you can
wind for the
use
moment,
yeah. I think
and
forever. Okay. So
uh,
but what I don't get then there is, do you think that government run businesses are able to compete with free market businesses?
uh, well,
I
so
feel
if we're
like
now calling the government lottery a business, I mean, I guess there could also be private lotteries that are not meant to fund government functions. So,
I mean
um,
they had to be, right? Otherwise that would be like that I feel like that's the only way a government lottery would survive against a free market business.
well, if the purpose of the free market lot or the non-government lotteries is to fund something else, then there would still be a motivation to fund the government lottery because the government lottery is the only lottery that is used to fund the police and the military and the courts, and you want to
But
have those.
but that would be again a donation, right? So
Well,
that
okay,
would
yeah,
be
we can.
again. That's my point. My point is actually that I think you can only the only way to fund law enforcement other than with taxes is by donations. I think there is no other way. Because like the
Okay, so yeah,
moment
if you want to call like buying a lottery ticket a donation, okay. I was using the term differently. Like on the one hand, you just donate the money to the government without even buying a lottery ticket. That would be one way to finance the government. And a different way would be to donate the money and then get a lottery ticket in exchange.
but
So that's the contrast I was
so
using.
so
But if you
I
want to use the term donate for both, okay.
I mean
But
I think we have to use the name donate for both because like we both agree that the government is worse at doing business than any private business, right?
uh, I mean, well, for calling the lottery a business, then I wouldn't say the government is necessarily worse at doing a lottery than, I mean, maybe it does even better
So
than private lotteries because people see there's such a need for these things, police, military, and so forth,
no, but
that,
that would not
the
be
government makes more money than any private lottery,
no no
possibly.
no 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 no. That would not be the function of the lottery. That would be what's happening with the money of the lottery. I'm just saying the business of the lottery itself. Can you imagine? Like that would be really a surprise to me that you would be advocating for that. That you would say that a government is as good. Like, what does it mean to be a good lottery? A good lottery means a good ratio between the amount of money that you pay and the amount of money that you can win and the probability of you winning, right? That would be a good lottery. That's how
I don't
we
know.
would determine it. And the fun that you're
There,
experiencing, maybe.
there might be different standards for goodness in a lottery. Like, given the purpose of the government's lottery, maybe a standard would just be, does it cover adequately the needs? Like, does it raise enough money for the police, the military, and the courts? And if it does, it's a good lottery.
But
Even if some other,
that's not what that will be a donation again. So let me just give you an example, and then you will, I think you will agree with me that that will be basically a voluntary donation. Me basically giving up something to fund me giving up something to fund the law enforcement of my country is a donation. Do we agree with that? Like the definition of
yeah, but
donation,
if there's,
the definition
but
of
if
donation is me giving up something to fund something. Like in this case, the law enforcement, right? That's a donation.
whether or not you get a lottery ticket,
No, just in general. In general, the definition of donation to my country, to my state, is me giving up something for that I have for this mean to happen, right? In this case, the law enforcement to exist. That would be a
sure,
donation. Okay,
I'm
and
happy to go with that for now.
if I have now two lotteries in front of me, and one is worse than the other, me choosing the worst one is me giving up something. The difference in things that I'm getting, like the difference in what the lottery is giving me, is me giving up something for the purpose of law enforcement happening. It's the same thing as the difference in these two lotteries. Me choosing the shittier one is me donating money. It's no difference. There is no difference.
I'm, could you explain? I don't know how important it is to go into this,
Let's make
but
it really easy with a
um,
car. Okay, let's make it really easy with a car. Let's say, for example, the Turkish government is
uh,
producing cars, right? And if I decide like I have now 20,000 euros and I want to buy a car, right? And then I have the choice between a Volkswagen, German car, or Turkish car. Okay, and
yeah,
even though the Turkish car has worse value for its price, I'm buying the Turkish car. That is a donation. That the difference in quality that I get for the same amount of money could be translated in money, and that is the money that I'm then donating to the Turkish government. Basically, it's just a different. It just looks different, but it's the same principle. I am giving up value. I could buy the same car. Let's say we have the
okay,
same car, $20,000 car from the Turkish government or $17,000 car from Volkswagen, and I am buying, even though it's the same car, I'm buying the Turkish one. I
Yeah.
have donated $3,000 to the Turkish government right now.
Okay.
And because I think that all state-run businesses perform worse than privately owned businesses, which I think you must agree to if you're actually a free market like if you're advocating for free market economies, then that's always the case, no matter what business the government runs. It must perform worse than it must perform worse and more inefficient than the private sector. Therefore, always me buying from the government would be a donation. Or the only other option is the government has a monopoly on that sector. In that case, it would not be directly a donation, but in that case, it would be force. In that case, they would basically force me to buy it. It would be the same thing as taxes. Like, let's say the government says, I have a monopoly on lotteries right now, which the Turkish government has done. Lotteries are forbidden in Turkey. At that point, I don't know if that's still the case, but it was like 10, 15 years ago. So lotteries were completely forbidden. It was not allowed because it was like gambling. But there was like this charity type lottery that you could buy the ticket, and the profits of that lottery would go to charity, basically. But it was government monopoly. There was no other lotteries.
Yeah. Okay, so I was just thinking that I don't know that the government is necessarily worse at some business that it does that is also done by a non-government uh, or person or group.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if you have I don't know, some amazing producer like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, and this person decides to work for the government. He could choose to not work for the government and do some line of business.
That would be a donation.
Um, okay, but are you just saying like because it would be a donation, therefore, like by definition, it it's not
I'm not making a
the
moral
government
judgment.
isn't
No.
the um actually, before we go any further down this road, I'm a
Sure.
little unclear on like what the relevance or the importance of this is.
The reason why we're talking about this is because I've asked you for how would law enforcement be funded if not with taxes? That was a question that I originally asked you. And your answer
Okay.
was donations. And also, there could be other things like lotteries, for example. That was one example that you gave.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then, while we were talking about something else, that popped in my head that I thought, actually, that's also a donation. That would end up being
Okay.
also a donation. So I don't think that there is any other way, because I have a problem with the donation part, right? So we both agree that there is a danger there of making government being run by donations. So, and therefore, us having a second option.
Wait. We don't. You just said we agree there's a problem
I mean,
if
you said
government is.
it's a small, minor problem, but we both agreed that,
No.
right?
I don't think it's a problem
I mean, that
that.
it's a danger. It's a danger that people that the law enforcement is being funded by donations. Didn't we agree that that's a
I don't think
danger?
that's a problem. Like I know some people will.
Danger that it could end up with a corrupt law enforcement.
Yeah,
Or
I
do you
know
think it's not
that's an
possible?
objection. That's an
Do you think it's not?
objection some people raise, but I don't. I'm not convinced it's a good objection. And I started to say some things
Oh, okay.
in answer to that. I had some other thoughts on it, which I didn't say yet, and maybe we can go back to.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's a problem.
I mean,
It's just an objection that some people raise, but I think
but
there are
Mhm.
things you can say in reply to that objection, some of which I've said, more of which I could say if we had more time. But I don't think it's definitely a problem. It's just an objection that needs to be answered.
I mean, if I say that I have an objection, and you say that your answer is not there yet, we don't really have an
Well, I said it's
answer,
not polished. I
or it's
said I
not
had some
polished. Yeah,
rough thoughts on it,
yeah. I
but I
mean,
don't
I guess
concede the
I mean
objection.
that's okay. I mean, the point that I have is the point that I'm making is that there is actually no other way of funding law enforcement other than donations or taxation.
I mean, if you want to call lotteries donations, I don't think it's really worth fighting on that. I think it's a pretty minor issue.
You don't
Like
think that
my
that's a
point is
don?
just
Yeah,
the point is just that you don't need to use coercion against people. And I think it's helpful to have a different term for lotteries and donations because one, you're just giving money and that's it. The other, you're giving money and you have a chance to win money. I think that's an important
but
difference,
you have a worse chance than
which it's useful to have a different term for,
I'm
but
saying
I
that
don't really think it's worth fighting
the
over. It's
difference,
not a big deal.
you're not donating the whole money. So if you buy a lottery ticket for $10, I'm not saying that you're donating all of the $10. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you are donating the difference in what you get for that $10, what you would get from a private company, which I think would make a better job at being a lottery. I think that private businesses do a better job at doing what they do. So I think that
So
there
you
is
think a
always
private
a
businesses should run the lottery for the government? Is that the point?
no, no. I say that if the government is running its own private business, it will always be worse than a private business itself without that is not being run by the government. That's what I think. I think that is also not that contentious that private businesses are more efficient and can produce the same goods in a more efficient way. So, and the difference in efficiency and in what you get for your money, for your value, this difference is what you're donating. Not the whole ticket. If do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. Especially, well, when you gave the example of the car,
Yeah, but the car
and
it
you said
makes
three
it's way
thousand
more easy. Yeah,
dollars. Yeah, I followed
but
what
it's
you're
the same
saying there.
principle with the lottery as well. It's the exact same principle, just more easy to grasp, I guess, with the car. So you're
Okay.
always donating when the government is operating a business, and if you're using either this business is going bankrupt or it's not going bankrupt because there is a monopoly, or they're not going bankrupt because people are donating, because people think that the cause is good and they're ready to basically donate the difference that they are getting in service quality reduction. That would be the
Okay. I guess the last thing I'll say on this is just
sure.
I'm not I'm not convinced right now that the private lottery is necessarily better than the government run lottery. Now, maybe if we talked more, you could convince me of that. But I think I've exhausted myself on this topic for now, at least.
Totally fair.
Um, but and I think I this is probably a good time to end the live stream because I only have so much energy for each
Totally
stream.
fair.
But I really appreciate the call, and I'm glad you called in. So thanks, and you're always welcome to call back, and maybe we can talk some more.
Same.
Um,
Same. Maybe I
yeah,
will definitely look into your channel, and thanks a lot for having me and for basically saving the stream for tonight. You have definitely saved it. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I'll check your channel out, and maybe I have another topic that I want to talk to you about, and then I'll hit you up.
all right, sounds good. Have a
Have a
good
good
day.
night. Bye bye.